It is the Martha Zoller Show, and it's always great to talk to my next guest, CEO of DeKalb County, Michael Thurmond. But I've known Michael Thurmond for a really long time. One of my favorite books he is the author of, it's called Freedom, and I talk about it all the time, and I encourage people to read it. It is the history of African Americans in Georgia before the Civil War. Michael Thurmond, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How about yourself?
Good. I'm doing great. So, I know your second book, well, it isn't your second book, I don't think, but it's a continuation of the book called Oglethorpe. How's that book doing?
It's doing well. The UGA Press published it in February, so we're in our third printing now.
That's great. That's very exciting. You're coming to the end of your term as DeKalb CEO. What has been the biggest challenge you've had during this time?
But not challenge. It's been a great opportunity. There were many problems that had festered for many years, from infrastructure to water and sewer system. We were under consent decree. We've invested over $750 million in the sewer system and another $500 million in the water distribution system to address long-term issues. We came in, I had a $24 million structural deficit. I'll walk out the door and DeKalb will have between $140 and $150 million surplus. We've been able to enact the first ever SPLOS in the history of DeKalb County, a sales tax devoted, number one, to capital improvements. We paved over 300 miles of road, but more importantly, Martha, DeKalb is the only county in Georgia that has a penny sales tax devoted 100% to property tax relief. We passed SPLOS 2 last November, and over the next 6 years, it's going to generate $1 billion. That's with a B, in property tax relief for DeKalb homeowners.
That's really exciting. I have a couple of questions about some things that you were involved in. Obviously, you were involved in the police training center, DeKalb County. Explain to people what that involvement was and where it is today, because you see the city of Atlanta, but there's an involvement of DeKalb County, right?
Yes, the city of Atlanta owned property, which was the old Atlanta prison farm, that's located in unincorporated DeKalb County. And the leadership in Atlanta during Mayor Lance Bottom's administration decided to build a training center on that property. Under Georgia law, they did not have to get permission from DeKalb to make that decision. It's exempt from our zoning ordinances and so forth. So they've decided, and they're well on their way to constructing a police training center in unincorporated DeKalb County.
And I've fully supported this all along the way. I mean, if we learned anything from the things that happened in summer of 2020 with the riots related to George Floyd, if we didn't know it before then, we knew it then, that we needed better training for not only police officers, first responders, firefighters, that kind of thing. And I think this, when you look at what it was when it was a training center, and then what it's going to be when it opens up, I think in December maybe, or January, it's going to be a state-of-the-art training center that law enforcement and first responders are going to get state-of-the-art training, and that's what we want.
Yes, I support, obviously, training and also paying our first responders competitive pay based on the pay scale. One of the things we had to do, that property is located in the South River Forest Basin, and so consequently there were some legitimate concerns regarding protecting the natural resources. I worked with Mayor Dickens and others and people in the community to make sure that there was a balanced approach. It's not an either-or proposition. Oftentimes in politics, you know it better than I do, Martha, you have to seek compromise. And so I believe that we struck a balance between allowing the city of Atlanta to exercise its legal right to build there, but also working to protect the neighborhoods and, most importantly, the abundant natural resource that's there. The South River Forest is the last really remaining natural forest of that size in Metro Atlanta.
Well, and I think that's one of the great things about Metro Atlanta. You fly into Atlanta, and it's a very green-looking place. Do you know what I mean? You fly in, we have done a great job, I think, all in all, of maintaining the balance between a city that continues to grow as well as having green space around. So, we're not perfect, okay, but we're pretty darn close to it. Anyway, wanted to ask you one other thing and I'm not going to get too political here, Mike, but obviously one of the biggest issues on voters' minds is illegal immigration and the impact of illegal immigration. We've had a huge influx at the border over the last 3.5 years, and we hear from a lot of cities and places around the country about how that's impacted them. Has the DeKalb County felt an impact from that?
No, I'm sure, just because I work with the Latin American Association, that we've had scores of people to move into DeKalb County. But we work with the Latin American Association and other agencies to try to make that transition as least impactful as possible. But let me just say this about the border. I'm talking now, one of my major points is we've become imprisoned by the tyranny of or. It's or. Everything is or. It's left, it's right, it's red, it's blue, it's black, it's white, it's liberal, it's conservative. I believe the solution at the border, is a wall, is it a path to citizenship? Rather than or, what if it was an and? What if you needed more enforcement at the border and a path to citizenship?
I agree with you. And I think, like you and I, Martha Zoller and Mike Thurmond, I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat. We could probably solve a lot of these problems because we know how to work together. But what bothers me the most about this argument at the federal government level, and obviously we can look at it from afar, you and I, is that, okay, on the one side, you had the House of Representatives that did pass a bill. They actually passed a bill. It went through the committee process. They passed it. They sent it over to the Senate. It's been sitting there for about 18 months. It's called H.R. 2. Maybe the Senate wouldn't have liked that bill, but the Senate plenty of times has stripped out bills that the House has sent over, put what they liked in it, then sent it back. There is a process for this that goes through committee, and you have debate, and you negotiate. And what happened with the Senate bill, at least from my perspective, is that 3 people got together along with the White House, put the bill together. They never put it into the committee process. They never actually brought it onto the floor. And I've seen the Senate very often. They'd take a bill that the House had, they'd put what they want in it, and then they'd send it back. There was a way, if that bill was the great bill that they said it was, to get it through. But it appeared to me that not only Democrats but Republicans didn't want to get it through. And so even though they had a bill that was passed on the House side, they didn't want to find a way to use that either. So that's what bothers me, is there's this, you're right, the either or. Well, Republicans don't want this and Democrats don't want that. Well, it could be, and Democrats don't want this and Republicans don't want that.
Well, yes, and one of the key to Republicans that didn't want to be, of course, was former President Trump. But whether you're Republican or Democrat, you should never put your partisan interests ahead of the best interest as the security of the United States of America. I agree with you. It's disgraceful. Cities, counties, all of us are being impacted by illegal immigration. I believe the bipartisan bill that emerged from the House, H.R. 2, actually was a step in the right direction. At least we would have gotten off being stuck on stupid on the border and began to move forward. That was a great opportunity to do it, and we didn't, and that's a disgrace.
Well, and hey, take a little bit from the House bill that I know the Senate didn't like, but take a little bit from the House bill, add some of it from the Senate bill. I mean, heck, how many times have we done that on great pieces of legislation over our history? We've just forgotten how to do it. You're right, we're stuck on stupid. When I was campaigning 10 years ago, I had people that didn't even know what a conference committee was. They fought with me to say, oh, we don't do that. I said, yeah, we don't do it anymore, but that's how we used to get things done.
What if here in Georgia, even in Washington, we just got the group of the hardest, the smartest, most dedicated, most experienced people who had the best interest of this nation or the state of Georgia in mind, and put them in a room and said, let's figure out what's going on in the state prison. How can we fix rehabilitation services? How can we improve outcomes for our kids in the public schools, irrespective of whether you're Republican? Just get the people in the room who are willing to work and come up with some solutions. That would change not just Georgia, to change the country, and I think get us back on the right pace.
Because the dirty little secret, Michael, and I know I'm older now than we first met, so I'm a little more cynical. But the dirty little secret is there are groups on both sides that make money off of these issues. And if you solve it, then there's people that aren't going to make money anymore. And I don't want to be that cynical, but I am starting to be anyway. Michael.
Oh, no, I feel the same way, Martha. I think politics may have passed me by. The last refuge of a scoundrel is extreme partisan politics. The last refuge of a scoundrel. That's where he or she goes. When they don't have the skills, they don't have the qualifications, they don't have a vision, they don't have a plan, they default back to extreme partisan politics. And that's where they go to hide.
Michael Thurmond, it's always great to talk to you and appreciate you being with us today.